Well, this is great. We're really excited to sit down with you guys. I'm excited to talk to you. We got Ken Resnick right here and Tom Ryther. You guys broadcasted how many years of Minnesota State basketball tournament for the boys and the girls?
Well, I did about 6.
Okay.
And then I think 1 or 2 years, Kenny was with me, and I got to know him pretty well, and I knew he knew his sports. So I had him do statistics for me. But I needed to fill time. At that 82 game in particular, he goes on the air. We wound up spending about a half an hour on the air as like he'd done it all of his life. And that started a great career for him.
And that was the only basketball tournament I did, and it was just by happenstance because the setup at the St. Paul Civic Center, you and I were up in that press box that hung down. Dick Bramer was courtside. And that day they found out there was no elevator. It was like 200 some steps for Dick to try and get from courtside up to the press box. So in the pregame, it was like I think the producer said, well, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. So Tom kind of said, well, let Ken can do it. I mean, he really knows his stuff. So I did the opening segment and didn't think I was going to be doing it anymore, and the producer and you kind of liked it, so I ended up doing cut-ins throughout the tournament. That was the first time I'd ever been on TV, and that led to eventually I got the sports director's job in Rochester because they called you wanting to know who I was, and then that led me into pro wrestling, the AWA, the World Wrestling Federation, and had it not been for the 82 tournament, I probably would have never been on TV.
Is that the only time you were working the boys' state basketball tournament?
Yes.
Was that year? Because then after that, it started to take off in a different direction, broadcasting.
Yep, and by then I was down in Rochester, and the whole thing, Kevin, was just by happenstance. If Dick had been with you in the press box, I would have never been on the air.
So just because there was no elevator in the St. Paul Civic Center led to a Hall of Fame broadcasting crew. That's what you're saying, right?
And now, you know who you have to blame for that? It was my idea that we do the game way up because we started about 10 o'clock in the morning. And then you're there like maybe midnight, you do 4 games, you're getting ready for games or you're doing games, and I said, I just would rather be up here where we're not disturbed by anybody. Now, it was a long way away, but you can blame me for that we were up there. Plus the bathroom was closed.
So whose decision was that? I mean, basically, initially not to have a play-by-play. I mean, that's kind of how Ray Christensen used to do it on the radio, just be only a play-by-play guy. And then I suppose the last maybe 30 years, the analyst has come in, and that job has been, very...
Well, no, they had an analyst, but Dick Bramer was courtside. I mean...
he was like a sideline reporter / analyst.
Well, yeah, I mean, he contributed throughout the games, but the problem is for him to get up to Tom to be on camera would have been literally about 200 steps, and you had to go through the crowd, go up through the balcony, and then come back down. It would have probably taken 5 minutes of real time to get courtside up to the press box. But I mean, Dick was doing the games with Tom, but it was a little unusual because
they're not together.
Yeah, normally, you've done games when you're working with a play-by-play guy and you're sitting next to each other. You just kind of give them a little quick office that you've got something to contribute, and it works. But the whole thing was by happenstance because evidently budgetary restraints prevented the Civic Center from putting in an elevator.
Yeah, and I remember budgetary constraints. You didn't get paid very much for that. Look what it led to. Tell me that I don't know talent. I hired Bramer, and then he came along and had this great career. I'm pretty proud of that.
That's great. Yeah, so Dick he had to remain on the floor because he's got to interview players or coaches before game or halftime or whatever. And so he can't just leave. And so, how was that for you, Tom? Working with the first couple of years before Ken jumped in and was your analyst, how was that being there alone up top, doing these games on your own?
Well, first of all, my background, after I got out of the University of Missouri, I went into the Army and I got out and got a job at an Illinois radio station, and I put together their sports department and their news department, and I was doing about maybe 125 games a year, basketball and football combined. So I did most of these broadcasts by myself. And then as time went on and our budget got a little bit better, I started hiring people to help me do stats. I'm not real good at math. And you got to be thinking, you know, I'd rather try to diagnose what kind of offense are they playing, what kind of defense are they playing, and the heck with all the numbers. So I did, when I came up here, I had to learn I need a statistician. But I did a lot of games on my own, and it's no fun.
So, okay, so you started in 78, Tom, is that right, doing the state tournament?
Yes, I guess that'd be about right, yeah, because I came back, I was working for NBC in Cleveland, I came back, 78 would have been about right, yes, yeah.
Okay, is that right, Tom?
78, 79.
New Year's Day, 1980.
You know, it's right, I came back on New Year's Eve of 79, so it would have been 1980.
Okay.
Would be my first tournament.
So you did the
That's
tournament like 4 years.
Okay.
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 5, yeah.
So let's go into a little history of, let's go back in time, but how did you get into broadcasting and how did you, get to the point where you're in Minnesota and, working for Channel 11, sports guy and state tournament and...
Well, I have to throw this out, okay? I just wrote a book called The Humblesheim Kid. That's the street I grew up on in St. Louis. And I think it had a lot to do because I went to a little high school that was very sports-oriented. I don't look like it, but I'm in my Sports Hall of Fame as a pitcher, not as a basketball player. But my mom and I went to a movie in 1948. I was 11 years old. There was a guy doing a newscast. I'd never seen it before at a TV store right next to the movie theater. And I looked at my mom, and I said, that's what I want to do. And that stuck
And you were
with me.
how old?
I was 11.
11.
In 1948. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a newscast. So I dreamed of doing that, and then I went all the way through high school and played baseball, played basketball. Well, I got to play in the varsity, but my job was to get the ball to our really good players so they could shoot and score, keep it away from me unless if I had a layup or something like that. But my interest in broadcasting started in 1948, and I had my first job at KBIA Radio in Columbia, Missouri for 50 cents an hour doing news and sports. And those who heard me thought I was overpaid. 50 cents an hour, that's a true story. And from there, when I graduated, I got to work for this radio. I worked down in Jackson, Tennessee for a while, and then I went to work at WIBV in Belleville, which right across the river from St. Louis. I helped to build their sports operation and their news operation. And then I worked there for quite a while, and then I heard there was a sports opening at KSTP Television in the Twin Cities. I took a run at it. I got the job, and I came here in 1971. Spent 7 years with KSTP. Then I went to work for NBC in Cleveland and New York for 2 years. Missed my kids, both of whom went to Jefferson High School. Said, I don't need the big time. I don't need the big apple. I'm a Midwest guy. Was lucky to come back to Channel 11. We were WTCN then, and we had the worst ratings in America. And then Gannett bought us and poured a lot of money into it. We got a lot of good reporters. We got Paul Majors. We had Ron Majors at Channel 5. And I rode their coattails to 2 first-place teams. It's sort of like when you were if I had played with you, I would have ridden your coattail to a state championship.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
36 years, Kevin, 36 years in broadcasting, and I loved every minute of it.
And you kind of stumbled into a broadcasting
Exactly.
career, so this is early 80s, and then where did you go from there?
After the state tournament, Tom called me about 2 weeks later, I think, and said, hey, let me ask you, you ever thought about a career in television? And I literally started laughing. And he said, no. The news director from the Rochester, Minnesota affiliate, which was an NBC affiliate, but carried the tournament, called Tom, wanted to know who I was and if I'd be interested in coming down and auditioning for their sports director's job. And I said to Tom, did you tell him I have no background in television? Zero, none.
What were you doing at the time?
I was district sales manager for Chrysler Corporation. So I had, I was a sports fan, but I had zero background in television. And he said, they still want you to come down and audition. So I drove down to Rochester, I auditioned, and about a week later they called and offered me the job. And I thought to myself, wasn't married, didn't have anyone dependent upon me for a roof over their head, why not? So I went down and they were great. I learned how to edit and, write scripts and use teleprompter. And, was down there, and then I came back up here. I still spent every weekend in the Twin Cities at the old Duff's Celebrity Golf Tournament, working with a good friend of ours, the late Jim Lupiant, doing what they call Celebrity Corner, where you would interview the celebrities for the crowd, so they could, hear them and, kind of feel like they were interacting with them. And happened to do an interview with Vern Gagne. And, I was a bit of a wrestling fan. And we did the interview, and that was it. And then at the party that night, Vern came up and, said, geez, I really appreciate it. It was a great interview, and kind of asked me, who I was and where I worked and what I did. And, that was it. And, I went back to Rochester. And I'll never forget, about 2-3 weeks later, the switchboard operator at the station pages me, and I pick up the phone, and she's like, hyperventilating that Vern Gagne's on the phone, wants to talk to me. And Vern wanted to know if I could get back in the cities, and I said, I'll come up every weekend. So we had lunch the following Saturday and talked, and he said, offer me a job doing AWA wrestling. And then from there it was WWF, and went on, did a lot of wrestling, did Roller Jam, did the American Gladiators, and it all stemmed from the setup at the St. Paul Civic Center and Tom needing air to fill.
Hey, tell them what McMahon had you do in order for you to get the job.
I had been with the AWA for 2.5, 3 years, and was done and left. Was actually thinking about going back to work for Chrysler, although it's got nothing to do with basketball, so shorten it up. And when they found out I had left, I got a call, and Vince McMahon flew me out to New York. And eventually I got into his office and met him. And it was funny, Kevin, I had a mustache.
I was going to ask you about that.
A big mustache.
Big mustache. And Vince asked me about the mustache, and I was kind of like, it's below my nose, above my lip center. What are you asking? And he said, I just want you to know I hate mustaches. And I kind of said, well, if you're asking if everything else worked out, would I shave my mustache? Yes, I would. And we never brought it up again. And we talked for probably an hour and a half. And then he just stopped, didn't say a word for about 30 seconds, opened his top desk drawer, pulled out a razor, a can of shaving cream, and said, bathroom's right through that door. And I shaved it. I walked back, and he said to me, you just showed me something really important. You back up what you say. You start Monday in Providence.
Pretty neat story.
And then that's how I got hired. And the funny thing was, you should have seen the expression on Vince's secretary when I come walking out about an hour and a half later, no mustache, and Vince says, we got to get him to Providence on Monday.
So how many years did you do that for with Vince McMahon?
I was with Vince for about 3 years, a couple of it full-time, and we did like a different city every day. We were on the road 20-some days a month. And then I took some time off and then went back, and I did the LPWA, the AWF, just done a bunch. In fact, even now it's great. There's an independent that's run shows here in the Twin Cities in the Midwest, Steel Domain Wrestling. Been in business for 20 years, and I still do get a chance to do some things with them to kind of keep my hands in it.
So give me some dirt on some of these wrestlers. So like Andre the Giant, did you ever
Oh, sure.
wrestle him or something?
No, I
Hogan,
worked.
Mad Dog Vachon.
Yes, all of them. Hulk was the name, gave me the nickname Killer Ken, which still sticks today. Worked with Andre. In fact, again, this is kind of near your stomping grounds for a while. Had the pleasure of spending a day with Andre at his ranch in Ellerbe, North Carolina.
I knew that, that's right.
And the funny thing is, everything was custom built for him. So if you're in the house and sit down on a chair in the living room, your feet are dangling because everything was built for him. And I remember asking, you're Andre the Giant. What are you doing living in Ellerbe, North Carolina? And the guy that was with him that took care of the ranch, Frenchie, said, the great thing is everybody knows we're here. So when we go into town, it's no big deal. People just wave to the giant and nobody bothers us. You know, we've been here. So yeah, I got a chance to you know, work with all of those guys. And it was fun because you get to know them as them, not as this, you know, larger than life characters they portrayed.
Right. I mean, I've heard Andre the Giant, I think I watched a special on him, and they said he's
HBO
one
special.
of the nicest, most genuine, gentlest people
He
you
was.
could ever meet.
And believe it or not, away from the ring, so was the Mad Dog. But Andre, the thing was for his size, like after the shows at the St. Paul Civic Center, we would always go to Mancini's for dinner. And Andre would drink bottles of wine like you or I or Tom would drink a bottle of water. I mean, he could have dinner and go through like literally 4 bottles of wine. It didn't faze him. No, I mean, it didn't. So yeah, there's some great stories about all those guys.
Who's the guy who had the boom box?
That was Buck Zumhoff.
When I came back from Cleveland to go to work for WTCN, they had a ring set up in the studio, and they were having a couple of matches, and they beat the heck out of each other, or seemingly so, in the match. But when it was over, they walked in the outer hall, and I had just started work there about 4 or 5 days earlier, and apparently the other wrestler took Zumwalt's boombox and smashed it in the ring during the bout. And when they were on the hall, they got into a fist fight over that. I said, this is for real. They should be taping this.
And as an addendum, without getting into the really gory details, Mr. Zumhoff now resides in prison and will be there for the rest of his life.
Oh, so no. I did not know that.